Remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel at NDN TV Nigeria. Click on the subscribe button and be the first to get notifications.
The Niger Delta has become the poverty capital of oil-producing regions across the world, due largely to the exclusion of oil-producing communities from the bounties of Nigeria's oil wealth over the years. In this report, Tekena Amiofori takes a look at the politics of revenue allocation and its implications on the development of Nigeria's Niger Delta region in the last 60 years.
Before crude oil became a factor in Nigeria's economy some 6 decades ago, the country had depended on the productive efforts of 3 economic zones for its income generation. At the time, northern Nigeria built granite pyramids that were a symbol of its agrarian prowess. Southwest Nigeria engaged in massive production of cocoa, which equally created substantial wealth for the nation. The then eastern region, comprising several communities in the Niger Delta, was a hub of rubber plantations, oil palm and coal. The existing revenue-sharing formula allowed regions to retain up to 50% of revenues generated from the economic zones and were encouraged to develop at their own pace. Nigeria enjoyed a robust economy and was regarded as the pride of the African continent. The economic zones that made the country thick were laid to rest soon after the discovery and subsequent exploitation of crude oil in the Niger Delta. By this time, the 50% derivation principle had been abolished to the detriment of the Niger Delta. After many years of agitation, the government of President Olusegun Obasanjo in 2000 introduced and implemented a derivation principle that conceded 13% of oil revenues to oil-producing states. 20 years after the implementation of 13% oil derivation principle, political and opinion leaders in Nigeria's oil belt are insisting that it's been grossly inadequate to address the challenges of infrastructure deficits and widespread poverty in the region.
Nigeria takes 87% of the oil money every day. 30% is given to the states that produce. They are arguing that we should come and give account of 30%. They don't account for 87%. And the equation there is the equation of inequality. 30% derivation is equal to 87% deprivation. All oil-producing capitals or cities in the world, the front line, the beach where is all skyscrapers. It's not Keke. It's not Okada. None of those cities where you see those dangerous objects called Keke and Okada. Warri and Efru are the most wretched oil-producing capitals in the world. It should not be so.
We need to devolve more powers to sub-national government, and we need to devolve more funding back to the sub-national governments. So there's a need to revisit the revenue allocation formula. There's also the need to revisit the derivation formula. And that's why we call for resource control. And resource control in such a manner that what happened in the past can also be called a now. Yes, give us 100%, but you can ask us to pay tax of 50%.
According to recent annual reports of the National Bureau of Statistics, the largest oil-producing states of Delta, Akwa Ibom, Rivers, and Bayelsa have accounted for highest unemployment rates in the country. Coincidentally, these states have been the worst victims of environmental pollution occasioned by oil drilling activities in over 6 decades. With a seriously degraded environment, communities have been forcefully dislocated from their livelihoods, creating an atmosphere of poverty and misery in a region that once flourished with commercial innovation and industry prior to the advent of crude oil.
We had palm oil here, and we traded 200 years with Europe, and the cities prospered there. Asaba, Asabase, Abo, Patani, Ganagana, all those cities palm oil, there was no fight. There was no violence then. It is because we were in charge of that business.
And the Niger Delta built city-states. City-states within less than 50 years. They had transformed from mangrove slums into city-states with urban utilities as street lamps. You had street lamp in Bini, you had in Boni, you had in Opobo. They created urban assets in terms of highways in their city-states, built imported buildings from Liverpool, from Scotland, from several places at great cost. Come back today. The language of competitive capacity has left us because we no longer talk about the economy, productivity. We talk about power. Power for nothing. Political power for stealing, political power for oppression, political power for impoverishing our people. That is what has gone wrong with us.
In recent times, there have been renewed agitations by oil-producing communities for equitable participation in the oil and gas industry, which has been the backbone of the Nigerian economy in the last 60 years. While they want the federal government to immediately reverse structural imbalances denying them a fair share of crude oil resources, the communities also look up to their respective state governments to begin to improve their lots with the implementation of sound economic policies.
If you create production hubs, then you are using the money you have to multiply the benefits that come to your people. If you say River State or Bayelsa, what does it take for you to produce $3 billion economy built around maize? River State will sit back and say, which local governments will be the farm areas, the processing areas, the packaging, and the marketing facilities? Where do we put pontoons and facilities for shipment of goods to an outflow point? Where do we build the factories that will process maize? What if the tonnage we need, we cannot plant them in River State? We need people who will go out and buy it and come. Our target is to make $3 billion a year from maize. When you do that, all the supporting mechanism will come because there are ownerships now involved, stakeholder groups who want to farm to get a portion of that 3 billion would begin to organize themselves, and government needs to put resources to help them in a way that is refundable. All this story about government not being in business, not being good in business is bullshit. We saw in 2008 to 2009 how almighty America, starting from President George W. Bush, to President Obama, invested billions of American dollars in private business because the private sector collapsed.
The Niger Delta, which is the most polluted region in the world, is equally one of the world's most backward regions, making it the worst victim of oil curse in Nigeria. Evidently, the region is in dire need of a breath of fresh air, which is possible with economic diversification. The federal government is expected, therefore, to take Nigeria back to the good old days when all regions were productive and economically self-reliant.
Inside the Niger Delta,